"Don't touch my car with those filthy hands." The words exploded through the air like a gunshot, sharp and humiliating. Heads turned inside the luxury dealership service bay. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. Standing in the center of it all was Caleb Johnson, a young black mechanic in oil-stained overalls, his strong hand steady despite the sting of the insult. He had only reached for the keys to the sleek black Lamborghini that had just pulled up, but the owner, or rather the driver, recoiled as if his very presence was contamination. She was Vanessa Whitmore, daughter of billionaire real estate tycoon Richard Whitmore, and she looked at Caleb as though he were invisible until it was time to scorn him. Her platinum hair shone under the fluorescent lights, her diamond bracelet glittered as she waved him off, and her voice dripped with venom. "I don't know how you got a job here," she sneered, tossing her keys onto the counter instead of handing them to him. "But trust me, I'll be calling corporate. My father does not pay millions for cars like this only for them to be handled by—" She stopped, letting the unfinished slur hang in the air. The service bay fell quiet. Other workers shifted uneasily. A few customers peeked from the lobby, pretending to check their phones but clearly listening. Caleb's jaw tightened. He wanted to defend himself, to shout back, but he knew how it would look. A black mechanic arguing with the billionaire's daughter. He swallowed hard, lowered his eyes and picked up the keys. "Your car will be taken care of, ma'am," he said calmly. But inside his pride burned. Vanessa rolled her eyes and walked away, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor. She didn't even glance back at him. To her, Caleb was no different from the grease on his hands, something to be scrubbed away, dismissed, disrespected. What no one in that bay knew, however, was that Caleb had a secret. A secret that would flip the entire power dynamic on its head. The day dragged on and whispers followed Caleb wherever he went. "Did you hear how she talked to him?" one coworker murmured. He didn't even fight back. Another shook his head. "Man, if that were me, I'd have lost my job today." Caleb just kept working. He repaired an engine here, rotated tires there, and pretended not to notice the looks. But inside, his mind replayed Vanessa's words again and again. "Don't touch my car with those filthy hands." Later that evening, when the shop was closing, Caleb stayed behind. He walked into the back of the building, past the service bays, into a part of the garage that most people at the dealership didn't even know existed. With a press of a code on a keypad, a massive steel door rumbled open. Behind it lay his own world, a private workshop, sleek and immaculate, filled with state-of-the-art equipment that outshined even the dealership's tools. Shiny sports cars, custom builds, and luxury vehicles lined the walls, each one polished to perfection. The name above the door read, CJ Motors. Because Caleb wasn't just a mechanic. He was the owner of the garage that the dealership secretly contracted for their toughest jobs. The man Vanessa had mocked for being filthy was the very man whose hands built and maintained the machine she worshipped. But here's the twist, Vanessa wasn't done with him. The next morning she returned with her father, Richard Whitmore himself, a towering figure in a tailored suit, known for crushing competitors with a single deal. His voice thundered across the service bay. "Where is the mechanic who disrespected my daughter?" The room froze. Every employee looked at Caleb. Vanessa folded her arms and smirked, her eyes daring him to speak. Caleb felt the weight of every gaze. His reputation, his job, even his dignity hung in the balance. But instead of fear, a slow, determined calm spread across his face. Because today was the day the garage door would open. What happens when the billionaire himself confronts Caleb? Will Caleb back down again, or reveal the truth that could shatter their arrogance? Where is he? Richard Whitmore's voice boomed like thunder rolling through the service bay. Every mechanic froze mid-motion. Tools clattered to the floor. Even the customers waiting in the lobby peeked through the glass windows, sensing drama. Vanessa pointed like an executioner delivering a verdict. "There he is, Daddy. That's the one who disrespected me yesterday." All eyes shifted to Caleb. He stood near the hood of a Lexus, hands stained with grease, shoulders squared. His heart hammered against his chest, but he didn't move. He simply looked up, meeting the billionaire's cold gaze. Richard strode forward, his expensive cologne cutting through the smell of oil and rubber. His tailored suit looked out of place among the workbenches and toolboxes, but his presence demanded the room. He stopped only inches from Caleb, towering over him. "You're the mechanic who dared insult my daughter?" Richard's tone dripped with contempt. Caleb's lips pressed into a thin line. "With respect, sir, I didn't insult her. I was only doing my job." Vanessa scoffed loudly. "Doing your job? You tried to put your dirty hands on my car. You think someone like you deserves to even breathe near a Lamborghini?" She smirked at the audience gathering around. "Daddy, I told you this place was going downhill. Look at the people they're hiring." The word people lingered in the air, weighted, poisoned, understood by everyone in the room. A few workers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Caleb and Richard. Richard's jaw tightened. "Do you know who I am?" Caleb nodded once. "Yes, sir. Everyone knows." "Then you know I could destroy your career with a phone call. You're nothing but a pair of greasy hands, boy. Don't forget that." The word boy landed like a slap across the face. Gasps rippled through the bay. Caleb's fists curled at his sides, but he stayed silent. Vanessa's grin widened. She leaned closer to her father. "Fire him. Right here. In front of everyone. Let him know where he belongs." Caleb's supervisor, Mr. Evans, hurried forward, sweating under the tension. "Sir, maybe we should." Richard silenced him with a glare. "I don't want excuses. Fire him." The room fell silent. Caleb felt every mechanic's eyes on him. Some sympathetic, some nervous, some waiting to see what he would do. But Caleb didn't flinch. He didn't beg. Instead, he removed his gloves slowly, calmly, and laid them across the Lexus engine. Then he wiped his hands on a rag, stood tall, and said, "If you want me gone, Mr. Whitmore, then fine. But before you do," he turned toward the large steel door at the back of the shop. "There's something you need to see." Vanessa burst out laughing. "Oh, this is rich. What, are you going to show us your little tool collection? Maybe a rust bucket you call a car?" Richard smirked, folding his arms. "This should be entertaining. Go ahead. Show us." The entire staff followed Caleb as he walked across the bay, the billionaire and his daughter trailing behind, smug and confident. Workers whispered, wondering what he was doing. Some pulled out their phones, already recording. Caleb reached the massive steel door, punched in a code, and pressed his hand against the biometric scanner. A heavy click echoed through the garage, followed by the deep rumble of gears. Slowly, the door began to rise, light spilling through the widening crack. Gasps filled the air. Behind the door was no rust bucket, no collection of dusty tools. Instead, it revealed a pristine, state-of-the-art garage lined with exotic cars, custom builds, and equipment that gleamed under polished lights. Sleek Ferraris, souped-up muscle cars, and even prototype models that few had ever seen outside magazines stood in immaculate rows. Above the entrance, glowing in bold metallic letters, was the name, CJ Motors. Richard's smirk faltered. Vanessa's laughter died in her throat. Caleb stepped inside, his posture shifting, no longer the silent mechanic but the master of this empire. His voice was steady, powerful. "You see, Mr. Whitmore, I don't just fix cars. I own this garage. The same garage your dealership secretly contracts for high-end repairs." Gasps turned into murmurs. Phones tilted higher to capture every word. Vanessa's face went pale. You're lying." But Richard's expression told a different story. His eyes narrowed, recognition dawning. He had heard of CJ Motors. Whispers of a rising powerhouse in the luxury auto world. He just hadn't realized the man standing in front of him, the boy with grease on his hands, was the genius behind it. Caleb folded his arms. "So before you talk about firing me, Mr. Whitmore, maybe you should ask yourself one question." The billionaire clenched his fists. "And what's that?" Caleb's voice rang out like a hammer against steel. "Who really holds the power here, the man who mocks the mechanic or the mechanic who builds the machines?" Richard won't back down easily. Vanessa is humiliated, but her father is ruthless, and he'll do everything to tear Caleb down. Will Caleb's secret empire be enough to withstand the billionaire's wrath? The garage bay buzzed with whispers. Phones were still recording, and Vanessa's face was crimson with humiliation. She hissed at her father. "Daddy, don't let him get away with this. He's making a fool out of us." Richard Whitmore's jaw was stone. His empire had been built on fear and dominance, and now, in front of ordinary mechanics and customers, his pride had been dented. He took a step forward, his voice low but sharp. "You think this little stunt makes you powerful, Caleb? Don't fool yourself. I don't care if you own this garage, this block, or this city. Men like me will always find a way to keep men like you in your place." Gasp spread again. The line was clear. It wasn't just about cars, money, or business. It was about status. About race. About the invisible walls society still tried to build. Caleb's chest tightened, but he stood his ground. "With respect, Mr. Whitmore, the world is changing. And so are the people running it." Richard's lips curled into a bitter smile. "We'll see about that." Within hours, the billionaire's machine went to work. By morning, news outlets ran sensational headlines. Local mechanic accused of fraud, lawsuits pending. CJ Motors linked to illegal imports? Whitmore Motors exposes shady competition. Caleb stared at the headlines from his office, fists clenched. None of it was true, but Richard's reach was vast. TV pundits debated his integrity. Customers canceled appointments. Deals froze overnight. Vanessa posted smug videos online mocking him. Lesson of the day, she sneered into her camera, don't pretend to be something you're not. Real success can't be faked. The comments section burned with venom, some supporting Caleb, many jeering. By the end of the week, Caleb's empire seemed to teeter on collapse. His staff grew restless, whispering about whether they'd still have jobs. A few even quit. Mr. Evans, his oldest mentor, placed a weary hand on his shoulder. Son, you've built something incredible. But Richard Whitmore, he doesn't play fair. You sure you want to fight him head-on? Caleb's answer was steady, though his heart carried the weight of storms. I didn't fight this hard, survive this long, to hand my dream over to a man who thinks I don't belong. If he wants a war, then that's what he'll get. The showdown came faster than anyone expected. Richard called a press conference, standing tall at the podium of his glittering dealership. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded, and Vanessa smirked proudly by his side. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, his voice carrying authority, I stand here not just as a businessman, but as a protector of integrity in our community. It has come to my attention that Caleb Johnson, his voice lingered on the name with disdain, has been deceiving customers, engaging in fraudulent practices, and endangering lives with illegal modifications. Vanessa nodded theatrically, whispering, that's right, into the microphone. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some looked skeptical, but others leaned in, hungry for scandal. Richard concluded, I urge anyone who values honesty to stay away from CJ Motors. And I promise justice will be served. The footage went viral. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Whitmore vs. CJ, hashtag fraud or genius, hashtag who do you believe. Caleb sat in his office that night, staring at the glow of his laptop. His reputation, years of sweat, sacrifice and grit, was being dragged through the mud. His chest ached, his vision blurred. But then his phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. Read. Meet me tomorrow. I have proof that could end Richard Whitmore. The next day, Caleb followed the directions to a small cafe on the edge of town. He spotted a man sitting in the corner booth, gray hair, nervous eyes, fidgeting hands. You must be Caleb, the man said, extending a trembling hand. My name's Daniel. I used to work for Whitmore Motors. Caleb slid into the booth cautiously. Why contact me? Daniel's gaze darted around the cafe. He leaned in, voice low. Because I've seen what he's done. Richard Whitmore built his empire on lies. He's cut corners, cheated customers, even smuggled parts from overseas. And I have the files to prove it. Caleb's breath caught. Why now? Daniel swallowed hard. Because I couldn't watch him ruin another man's life. Not after what he's done to mine. He slid a flash drive across the table. Caleb's fingers trembled as he picked it up. Daniel whispered, everything you need to bring him down is on there. That night, Caleb stared at the drive glowing under his desk lamp. The decision weighed heavy. If he released this, he wasn't just defending himself, he was declaring war on a billionaire who could crush him in ways he hadn't even imagined. But then he remembered the sneer on Vanessa's face. The contempt in Richard's eyes. The whispers of customers who had judged him before knowing the truth. Caleb closed his hand around the flash drive. His jaw set. The time for silence was over. Armed with evidence, Caleb prepares to confront Richard head-on. But will the world believe him, or will the billionaire bury the truth before it ever sees daylight? The next morning, CJ Motors was buzzing, not with customers but with whispers, fear, and tension. Caleb gathered his remaining staff, those who hadn't fled when the headlines turned sour. Their faces were worn, anxious, waiting for a miracle. Caleb stood tall, the flash drive heavy in his pocket. I know the last few weeks have been brutal. I know some of you are wondering if this place even has a future. But hear me now, Richard Whitmore may have money, but what we have is the truth. And the truth always finds its way to the light. Some staff nodded, hesitant. Others looked unconvinced. Caleb could see the doubt in their eyes, but he could also see the spark, faint but alive. He tapped the desk. Tonight, I'm opening the garage door. And when I do, the whole city will see what kind of man Richard Whitmore really is. That evening, Caleb held a press event at his garage. The lot overflowed with reporters, customers, and curious onlookers. Camera flashes lit the night. For the first time it was Caleb at the podium, not Richard. He looked out at the crowd, heart thundering but voice steady. They called me a fraud. They called me a thief. But tonight, I'm not here to defend my name with words. I'm here to show you the truth. He signaled to his assistant. The projector screen lit up behind him. First came financial documents, transactions showing Whitmore Motors had funneled millions into shady offshore accounts. Then shipping records, proving parts were smuggled illegally and sold at inflated prices. Then came videos, mechanics secretly recorded, describing unsafe shortcuts they'd been ordered to take. The crowd gasped. Murmurs erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Finally, Caleb dropped the bombshell. A document appeared on the screen, bearing Richard Whitmore's signature. An internal memo instructing staff to cover up a massive safety recall, a cover-up that had led to accidents, even deaths. The audience roared with outrage. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Johnson, are you saying Whitmore Motors endangered lives for profit? Caleb didn't flinch. I'm not saying it. I'm showing you. Within hours, the story exploded across every network. Hashtags flipped. Hashtag Whitmore Exposed trended worldwide. Customers demanded refunds. Lawyers lined up with lawsuits. And at the center of it all, Richard and Vanessa Whitmore sat in their mansion, watching their empire crumble live on television. Vanessa's face was pale, her phone buzzing non-stop with hateful comments. Daddy, do something. This can't be happening. Richard's hands trembled as he gripped his glass of scotch. For the first time, the titan of business had no words, no press conference, no power to spin, because the truth, undeniable and documented, had spoken louder than any smear campaign ever could. 2 weeks later, federal investigators raided Whitmore Motors. The headlines that once smeared Caleb now celebrated him. Mechanic turns whistleblower, saves community from billionaire's greed. CJ Motors owner praised for exposing scandal. The underdog who took down a titan. At CJ Motors, the garage was busier than ever. Customers lined up, not just for repairs but to shake Caleb's hand. His staff, once doubtful, now walked taller, proud to wear their uniforms. Mr. Evans beamed like a proud father. I told you, son. You've built more than a garage. You've built a movement. The final blow came when Richard Whitmore himself faced cameras outside a courthouse. No longer a giant, but a man cornered. His eyes were dark, his shoulders sagged. Do you have anything to say about the allegations, Mr. Whitmore? Shouted a reporter. Richard glanced at the cameras, then at Caleb, who stood across the street, surrounded by supporters. Their eyes met. For the first time, Richard lowered his gaze. The empire was gone. The arrogance stripped. And all that remained was silence. That night, CJ Motors hosted a reopening celebration. Families filled the lot. Music played. Children laughed. And as the garage door lifted slowly, revealing the polished cars inside, Caleb stepped forward with Vanessa's old words ringing in his ears. You'll never be more than a grease monkey. But here he stood, not just a mechanic but a symbol of resilience, a man who had faced the storm and come out stronger. He raised his glass. To every underdog who's ever been mocked, underestimated, or told they don't belong, let this be your reminder. You don't need their permission to shine. Build, fight, stand. And when the time is right, open your own garage door. The crowd erupted in cheers. And in that moment, justice wasn't just served, it was celebrated. No matter how powerful the opposition, truth and resilience will always outlast lies and arrogance. Underdogs may stumble, they may struggle, but if they hold on, their breakthrough can shake the world. Have you ever been underestimated or mocked, only to prove everyone wrong in the end? Share your story in the comments, we'd love to hear it. If Caleb's victory inspired you, don't miss the stories we tell here every week. Stories of struggle, resilience, and justice. Subscribe now, hit the bell, and join our growing community of fighters and dreamers.